Hi, I'm Mary Elizabeth Williams, and this is Patient. This guy in front of me is Larry Smith. He is the creator of the best-selling book series, Six Word Memoirs. He's the co-author with Melanie Abrams of The Joy of Cannabis, 75 Ways to Amplify Your Life Through the Science and Magic of Cannabis. He is also just a man about town. You do a million things. You have had 15 balls in the air for as long as I've known you. And I have known you really long time. You were the first friend that I made in San Francisco when I moved to California,
And
Larry.
then probably again in Boston when we weirdly lived 3 blocks from each other in Boston years ago. Who does that? San Francisco to Boston.
We have followed each other across countries, and then we both lived in New York City together because I know I can't believe that now
Because of course,
we're oceans apart. This is unusual for us, but here we
I'm
are.
actually doing this recording with you from a flight that's about to land in Scotland. So get ready.
Thank God. You can be my first friend here. All right, I want to get into it now. You are not a doctor. You are not dispensing medical advice. That's not what you're
I'm not
dispensing.
even dispensing cannabis. No,
You're not even
I'm not
dispensing
dispensing
cannabis.
medical advice either.
You're just dispensing your experience and what you've learned as a journalist. Let's start there, Larry. Let's start with, well, I always like to ask, let's start with how this has radicalized you.
Wow, how did this radicalize me? Well, in a sense, it didn't radicalize me. It evolved me. And I'll say this, I have been in the storytelling business for forever, from fourth grade editor of the fourth grade newspaper to journalism, to community storytelling, to the six-word memoir project you mentioned, to now working with companies on stories. And then when we'll get to how this book came about, then at some point I'm doing this book on cannabis, and it's like, what's the through line? Wow, what an insane LinkedIn profile I have. Who can make sense of this? And in a funny way, in the process of writing this book with Melanie Abrams, I was like, oh, here's the through line. It's all about unlocking things. As a journalist, you unlock stories, you unlock ideas that you're trying to make sense of. At working with companies, help them unlock their mission, their team alignment. Working with students, unlock creativity, agency. And that is the through line of my life and my career. I unlock communities among friends and professionally and personally. And so it it was radical in that, can you do something what's on paper is seemingly different? I'm a journalist, started the six-word memoir project, which, well, I'll say this, I'm coming to you in my formal work uniform, which is jeans with no decipherable holes, sneakers that I probably shouldn't wear because I need better foot support at this age, but a six-word t-shirt that my agent gave me and Melanie in our first book reading, Sparking Joy with Science and Magic. So 6 words plus cannabis. And I wear this t-shirt because you're in line at like the market or the subway or the bus, and someone's like, hey man, oh man, I like that, what's that about? And I can say, well, I do this 6-word thing and this is about cannabis, and it really is science and magic. And so we have a conversation. But as in the course of so it's 2020, and a lot of my work is in live spaces, working with students on storytelling, companies, backstory events that are a lot like the Moth that you, Mary Beth, have in fact been part of a number of times, where
A
people
lot
tell
of
stories, they
times.
start with 6 words, and then we unlock the backstory. And all that went to pretty much zero, like a lot of our work, for worse and occasionally for better, during the pandemic. And so Melanie and we decided and she's a professor of creative writing at Berkeley here in California. And suddenly, like, yeah, there was Zoom eventually, but suddenly her work kind of froze. And we decided to write this book, a pandemic project about two things that we loved. And if it's okay, I'll tell you the origin story of this book. It's December 2019. There is no pandemic. Everything's just going along swimmingly in this perfect universe of ours. And I walk into a party in the Bay Area in 2019, and I actually don't know a lot of people. I just moved back, and I start talking with a few different people, and this new stranger to me named Melanie said to our little group of people, little water, hey, I said, does anybody want to drink? And she said, I don't really drink. But by the way, does anyone want to go outside at this party and get high? Now, this is not a crazy question in most of the world, but certainly in the Bay Area in 2019. And it wasn't like people were like, well, who is this crazy woman? But like nobody said yes. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And so we did with the safe and legal cannabis that's available to the world these days. And we started having a conversation. We talked about how much we really loved cannabis for all the reasons that we eventually wrote a book about the Beatles, we just started talking. Now, the truth is, Melanie and I are not the type of people who need anything to start talking and having a great conversation, but the beginning of our friendship and what became a professional and personal relationship was on a deck in the Bay Area because she said, does anyone want to get high? And shockingly, only I said yes. And that was the beginning of it. And then suddenly we're in a pandemic. And I thought, I don't even know how exactly it came up, but I wanted a project. And when we were talking to an agent that we both knew. And well, what about music? And I'm like, there's better people to write a music book. And I'm like, what about a book on MDMA? She said, maybe Michael Pollan can get a book deal for that, but pretty much no one else can these days. And I'm like, cannabis? She's like, cannabis. Long story short, we start talking, and Melanie looked at me and said, we should co-write that together because I really understand the science better and you understand more of the magic. And I said, I was thinking exactly the same thing. So that began a fast, probably 6 months writing this book. We had time during the pandemic. Then it came out, about a year and a half later. And it was an evolution. And as I said to Melanie, who is a novelist and has certainly done nonfiction writing, I said, in the magazine world, what we would call this is one large package about cannabis. It's a long magazine story in the shape of a book. It'll look a little different, but essentially we're going to break this down and we broke it down into 6 chapters. We can get into that later if you like. And we were going to do research as journalists do. And so the book is broken down into 6 areas. And at the beginning of each section, and I will just want to do them I will just read them in the order they appear. The body, the mind, cannabis for connection, productivity, creativity, and all these things equal number 6, joy. Each part of the book starts with about 1,000 words on the science, right? Why it actually increases productivity. What are the things that happen in your body that brings joy, connection? And then from there, it's like, okay, now that you know that, what are some really fun things you can do around productivity, around connectivity, around joy, around cooking, all sorts of things.
I have
So
to say,
it's
it's
news
one
you
of the
can
things,
use. Yeah,
Larry,
go
it's one
ahead.
of the things I really appreciate about the book. It's that it's an activity book.
It's an activity book, and it's such a beautiful book, and the design is really like exceeded our expectations. Like you can sort of write in it, and we may eventually do a companion workbook, but it's absolutely a book you can open up to any page. And we have this chart. We have a paper chart that we send to people who like it, which you can mark off your activities with all the 75 activities. And there's sort of something for everyone. And my favorite activity won't be yours, and some you'll never do, and others maybe you will get high and roll down a hill like the old days, right? It's really fun without cannabis in the right environment and the right person and the right body chemistry, because all our bodies are different. It's even more fun to roll down a hill.
Let's talk about that. First of all, let's talk about the fact that, as you know, as I have told you, I never in my life have reacted well to cannabis.
And
Ever.
many people don't.
Ever in my life. I've given it, I think, a good try. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's that I've been in the wrong circumstances. I have not had the right kind of sommelier to guide
Yeah.
me through, but I have gotten migraines. I have gotten like dizzy or I've had nothing at all happen. And I'm like, this is not like I want to enjoy what you're talking about. Sounds amazing. I'd like to roll down a fucking hill. That sounds great. And it never works for me. What is, what do you think that's about?
So
Is it just because I'm so uptight? Is
So
that it?
there's a couple of things. No, I mean you are and you're not. You know what I mean? You and I are both type A creatives. You know what I mean? Like you are what you are, and it's
But we've
perfect,
had fun together.
inarguably. And so I hear Melanie and I have heard a lot of things before and after we wrote this book. So one thing, which is not what you're saying, is like, yeah, I got high in college and with pop brownies, and the next thing you know, I was like drooling into the carpet and couldn't move. And I was like, okay, yeah. So a couple problems with that. No one knows what they're doing in college baking pot brownies. It is, you really don't know how much was in there, and that may be it for you. But like a lot of bad experiences, I mean, this is a rated R kind of podcast, or like who really had great sex the first time? You know what I mean? Who knows what they're doing? Like a lot of first experiences, it doesn't always work, and you can leave it at that. And what I would say is, well, if you are, and again, your case is a little different. If you are cannabis curious, I would say things are a lot different. Number one, most of then it was, that was largely flour, unless you baked it. Flour meaning, that bud that you hold and might have been sold to in Washington Square Park when you were 17, and it actually also could have been oregano. So the flour, the plant, right? That was the way most of it was, unless you were making it home. And some people knew how to do that, brownies and things like that. I never did. In 2000, and what did our book come out, like 2022 or 23? But for a long time now, number one, the legalization of cannabis, and we can talk about the tragedy of it being illegal for so long later, means that like when you walk into a dispensary, you know exactly what you're getting, whether you're smoking it, vaping it, or eating a gummy or any kind of chocolate edible, right? And that's really good news. And I mean, back in the day, the THC levels, the chemical that makes you high, were really high. And fortunately, there's a thing happening now where like a lot of companies are marketing higher THC levels because you think that's people want, but in fact, that's not a good thing. Super high THC levels for most
I'm so
people.
glad you
So
mentioned that because I wanted to talk about that, that I know that cannabis is not what it was.
it's not
It's
what it was.
very different now.
So now we live in a world where dispensaries looks like a lot of them look like Apple stores,
Right, because
and
they are in the burnt embers of what used to be cupcake stores.
yeah, exactly. Like Sex and the City fancy cupcake store is now, everywhere, and the Magnolia Cafe, and now the kind of like, the dingy kind of the dingy kind of like head shop thing. There still are in unfancy the cannabis dispensaries, but they're very fancy cannabis dispensaries. And so let's go with the I'm curious. I don't know where to start. I had a bad experience in college, or like, I mostly have liked to drink Chardonnay or bourbon or whatever, but I'm curious. So one of the things I would say is, and this is Melanie and I talked to like many of the legends of cannabis, the people who, we're on their shoulders, who've done the research, who've started the first medical dispensaries, who have been, working on legalization for years. And so when I talked to one of the founders of the first medical dispensary in the country called Harborside, I said, what is your recommendation for a new user going into your or any dispensary? And he said, start with one of these fancy dispensaries like mine, because we hire the best. You mentioned sommeliers. They're called bud tenders now, like bartenders. We hire and train the best in the world, right? It's a great job to get if that's what you're into, right? They really know what they're doing. And by the way, I mean, I heard this from multiple experts, going in for the first time at 5 p.m. on a Friday, bad idea. Tuesday at 2 is good because they have time and they want to talk to you, right? So you don't want to go in at rush hour anywhere in life, but certainly at a dispensary. Talk to them and tell them what you are looking for, and they can really help you. And you know what? Our prices are a little higher than some of these other places because we have labor costs that are harder, and we're probably sourcing a little differently from their product. And when you got it figured out, go to a cheaper place that has this, because you're not paying for these same services anymore. You know what you want. In the old days, what I would do is, and I joke about this, I would walk into a dispensary and I would say, here's the deal, friend. I have 10 minutes, $60, and I want cannabis for sex and sleep. Go. And they'd be like, gotcha, friend. And they would do it, right? But try to have a little more time than that. So that's something they really want to help you. They're super smart, and if you go to the same, they get to know you. And also, there's a phrase in the world of cannabis and psychedelics, set and setting, right? So, like, how are you using it and where are you, who and you're with? So, for first time users, I don't recommend going to a rave or even like, a Wilco concert. So that's, if you like a Wilco concert, it's a great way for me to do 5 milligrams of edibles, right? But do it with someone who's done it before in a comfortable setting, someone who knows exactly what 5 milligrams means and 10 milligrams. And now I'm talking about edibles. And edibles, the funny thing about edibles was in the old days, when is the brownie going to kick in? Oh, it's not working. I'll take another one. And this is a mistake people make with edibles, especially young people, which is super upsetting, which is like, for the first time they're with their friends or something, somehow they got it, they're probably too young to have it, they take an edible, it's not working in 10 minutes, they take another one, and no one's going to die because you can overdose on cannabis. You can crash your car, you can do many things, but the pure amount, you'd have to have 1,000 pounds of cannabis to overdose of cannabis, and it's never happened. But you can do things that are unfortunate. So whether you're a teenager, who I hope is not experimenting with it, because we say to our kids, your executive function, your frontal lobe and your executive function will be fully developed at 25. We used to think it was younger, but newer studies say that it's 25. I want your big brain to get as big as possible. Now, I'm also aware that they may, as I did, experiment with things before then. So whether you're 85 or a younger age, I don't even want to say like 18 because it's not legal and it's not good for your brain. Low and slow. You start slow and with a low dose, because you can always add more a little later, but it's really hard to take it away, right? So low and slow.
I want to
Yeah,
ask,
please.
so now let's say you're an old pro at this. You've been smoking weed for the last 30 years. You're fine. Yet you pick up this book or you talk to you and Melanie. What am I going to discover about maybe using it differently or that I didn't understand this could do as a tool in my life to make it better?
Great question. And you're going to discover, honestly, some of the things we discovered because with any great story, you go in knowing no one knows everything. At that point, you would have already written your story, written your book or whatever. You go in knowing something, mostly being super curious, and then asking lots of other people, right? And it's exactly what we did, which is one of the reasons it was just so fun to do this. And for people who to take your calls, and like almost everyone is like, yeah, like I would love to talk to you about this. I'm so glad you're doing this book, which is really felt like really, I don't know, validated by people saying, well, wait a minute, you haven't been in the industry for 30 years. How dare you? They're like, wow, you guys know what you're doing. You have great backgrounds in writing and journalism. And like, we're glad that someone's making a book that, by the way, you should feel proud to put on your coffee table because it's beautiful. You know what I mean? Or on your bedside. And you know what, we can talk about things like, would you hide a book of wine from your kids or your guests at a party? No, you really wouldn't. And you shouldn't we want to live in a world where this is normalized, where the whole, oh, it's wine o'clock for the moms, like Chardonnay. And if someone's like, whoa, what about, that's not how I like to, change my body chemistry and relax. I like cannabis. You shouldn't be the weird mom or dad. You know what
And
I
do you
mean?
think do you think that you're not the weird mom or the weird dad anymore because it's so different now? I mean, it is legal in so many places. It is acceptable in so many different forms. Do you feel that that stigma is still persistent?
It's moving along, and I will get back to your question about what people who are old pros can learn, because you and I, we always remember that we always get back to the North Star. So I'll give you two examples. When I started writing this book, three people asked me questions. Number one, my younger sister, who also lives in the Bay Area. And I say, hey, and we have a lot of the same genetics, and it turns out a lot of the same sleep problems. And I said, hey, I've been, and again, we can talk about sleep because that's a big question that comes up. I've been, trying different types of edibles, and I think I've kind of found one and it is kind of experimental, right? You play, like, you don't like the first beer you taste it, but oh, wait a minute, and it takes a while, and there's some, you know, costs and time and body stuff that you're going into. But I'm like, hey, I think I found a really good edible for sleep. And she said, well, can you bring me some? I said, well, I don't think I'll be in the city for a couple of weeks. This is during the pandemic. Like, you weren't driving so much. And I said, but according to Yelp, there are 3 dispensaries within like 4 blocks of your place, and 2 have 20% off for first customers. She's like, I don't know how to do that. This is a smart little sister who's like, I'm like, I just don't know. And that was like how to navigate a dispensary. Well, here's what you do, and you ask these questions, but you know what? I'll go with you, or I'll just bring you, and I'll bring it to him. But and then my mom was like, hey, my mom, who got high once in the 70s with their kooky chiropractor friend on New Year's Eve, it's a true story, was like, hey, can you bring me some cannabis for sleep? I heard that's good too, and also a little bit for anxiety. And I was like, well, mom, yes, I can. You know what I mean? I cannot carry it on a plane because even though it's legal in New Jersey and legal in California, it's not legal to carry on a plane. But when I'm home, you and I are going to take a trip to the dispensary. And I went with my mom. And that was a fun day. And then my older sister, asked about it for pain, and that's trickier because it has some absolute, like, some studies shown it actually can alleviate pain, especially with CBD and combinations. But that's a little trickier. And unfortunately, you can't necessarily ask your, your doctor about cannabis because it's not federally approved. And while some doctors will talk to you about it, some are afraid to because they could lose their license. So that's some of the questions that I got asked about my own family. In terms of, do you have a follow-up? Because I'll talk about some of the surprising things that people who are like old pros at this.
Yeah, I don't have a follow-up. I have a backup.
Back on up, baby.
Let's back on up to that thing.
Yeah.
But what is something that someone who may be, have been an enthusiast for decades would say, "Oh, I didn't know that I could use it this way," or "I didn't know that
One of the
I could
biggest,
do this."
one of the biggest things of surprising is, and we made it one of our six pillars of how to experience the joy and the science and magic of cannabis, is productivity. And I'll tell you why. It's interesting. And you hear these stories of like half of Silicon Valley is microdosing, not just cannabis, but mushrooms and other things. And they frankly kind of are. It's probably more like 20%. But the way cannabis affects your brain puts you into a version of flow state. It puts you in the moment. What cannabis does, according to the science, is that and there's much more. Melanie is so good at really explaining this and all the good science technical terms. But for the layman, so down back on earth, which is me, the way cannabis interacts with your brain, it decreases inhibitions, it makes you more focused, and it puts you in the moment. And I'll tell you what that can do. It can flow as you're making a PowerPoint. Some people love to do Excel. Many people can get in a really good state of writing with cannabis. You're in flow state. Flow state is when you're like, just when you're in a state of just kind of it's like being in the moment, but in a faster way, right? Athletes love flow state. You hear these stories. How did you do that extreme snowboarding? I was in flow state. There's that phrase runner's high. We think that is activating the part of the brain, dopamine state and parts of the brain. But in fact, it's activating a part of the brain called the endocannabinoid system. And here's the deal. We didn't even know there was a part of our brain called the endocannabinoid system until the early 90s, when a couple of scientists in Israel who'd been doing lots of research on cannabis. And one of the problems is that so much of the research on cannabis and things like psilocybin and MDMA were hard to do because they were legal. And luckily that world is changing. There's lots of stories and data about that. But as they were doing this research, they realized that there was this part of the brain that was acted so much like cannabis that they named it the endocannabinoid system. Can you believe that? After cannabis. And so when you're using cannabis, for those who it works for, and again, it's not everyone, and there actually may be I think there's a gene, there's a gene where like alcohol doesn't work for people. Melanie has that gene. And there are some people, literally, it just doesn't work for. And that could be you. It also could be like you haven't tried the right thing at the right time, but just could be, and it doesn't work for everyone. That's absolutely true. But so when cannabis interacts with the endocannabinoid system, it puts you in this state that decreases inhibitions, makes you more focused, and puts you in the moment. And I am going to read this part because, as we know, Michael Pollan is always right. And Michael Pollan wrote this in the
I don't
book.
agree with you on that, but we're not going
Okay,
to get into
okay.
that.
I'm personally, I think Michael Pollan has been really good for the world of how drugs can really be great for humans. And because he's kind of a mainstream ambassador, he's not seen as like Timothy Leary, who was not in hindsight not the best ambassador for LSD. But in the botany of
You and I
the
have a debate later about how his position on food and cooking.
Oh, okay, because that's different. I'm going to go with a position on drugs. So over 20 years ago, in the Botany of Desire, he wrote this about cannabis. Oh, because cannabis, you hear that cannabis makes you forget a little bit, and it can create short-term memory loss, right? But that's one of the reasons you're in the moment. Okay, and here's what Michael Pollan said years ago. It is the relentless moment by moment forgetting that helps us account for the sharpening of sensory perceptions, for the aura of profundity in which cannabis bathes the most ordinary insights, and perhaps most of all, gives the sense that time has stopped, has slowed, or completely stopped. And that's what makes nature more beautiful for those who use cannabis and it works for them. Food is tastier. Music sounds even better. Oh my God. Listen to While My Guitar Gently Weeps High. What's better? And high sex with the right strain and the right person, for some of us, is the secret of the universe. I added that part, not Michael Pollan.
I know you're a big advocate for that, which you're living proof. It's great. I love all of that because you when I saw you at Housing Works talking about this book, you and Melanie were talking about that. And who doesn't want to have better, more intimate, amazing sex, right?
Everybody wants to have better, and you said a good word, intimacy, which is that like, because when you release inhibitions, some of us, it does make it a lot more easy to be intimate, to be yourself, to like just open up. And again, you don't need drugs for that. But if cannabis works for you, why wouldn't you want to amplify that? I just can see no reason why you wouldn't. But also, meditate. If meditation is another good way to get into that state. There's lots of ways to do it. Cannabis is, above all, I will say this, cannabis is a tool. It's a tool to be used thoughtfully, to be used with education, and it is a tool that different people, different bodies, different brain types, personalities, we use it a different way. In the productivity section, one of the things I ask people, well, how do you, when I realized, oh, this is great for productivity, and I ask people, do you use this for productivity? And a couple of people said, I love to clean my house high, right? And it turns out I do too.
You
And,
know,
hand me an edible and a vacuum and I'm all yours,
and you're the
And
king of the world. You're the king of cleaning. Larry, I think this is so important to have this conversation without stigma, without shame. There's no point in that anymore. And wherever you are on the spectrum of using or not using or how you use it, as you said, it's a tool. It's just a tool. So why not use it responsibly in a way where you have educated yourself a little bit, where you've got the right information. And you are a guy that loves to just teach people and tell people how to do things. So,
I
Larry,
just
thank you.
talk to people about what you know and get their insights and share them. And it's like, look, this book this book sits out on the bookshelf next to a book I probably have on bourbon with three kids here, and we're not encouraging them to do it, but like it should be as demystified as alcohol, and it should be, and when you do that, they're less likely to sneak away and buy some stuff which who knows where it came from, and no one's buying that at these age.
Right.
But like, we want to make this not just for kids but for adults, to be like, it's another tool. Some people use alcohol to relax or whatever. It's another tool that can be used in so many more ways than most of us, including me, until I wrote this book, even realized.
Larry, I love you, my friend. I'm so happy that you are the person who is out there guiding us all through the weeds, you and Melanie.
There are many good sources, and we're happy to be part of that
The
community. And we hope that people get something out of our book and our conversation today.
the book again is called The Joy of Cannabis, 75 Ways to Amplify Your Life Through the Science and Magic of Cannabis. Larry, I'll just give my 6 words. I love you. I love you.
The feeling is mutual. What a pleasure to talk today, Mary Beth.
I love you, honey.